Welcome back to the AI Professor. Today, we're diving deep into the Bukhari group of companies.
All right, get ready because we're diving deep today. We're tackling Bukhari Electricals Ltd. You've given us a ton of material on this one. Reports and articles, even some personal notes.
Yeah.
All on this Indian electrical giant. 8 different units. Each one's got its own personality, you could say. And they're making everything. I mean, from tiny circuit boards to these massive transformers. So what's the mission today? I think it's to unearth those hidden gems, those little aha moments that show how quality really works out there, in the messy real world. And to help us navigate this mountain of information, we have a true expert in quality management systems. Welcome back.
Thanks. Always happy to dig into these complex cases. Bukhari Electricals, it's fascinating. They've got this mix of old and new approaches. It's a real puzzle to see how it all fits together.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we see some units clinging to, outdated methods, and then others are embracing cutting-edge technology. Some are obsessed with zero defects. Others, well, good enough seems to be the motto. So I'm really curious to see how that impacts their brand and their overall quality, of course. But before we jump into all that, let's set the scene a little. Bukhari Electricals, or BEL for short, have been around since 1965. But it's not a single entity. It's more complicated than that, right?
Right. BEL is a conglomerate, a bunch of acquisitions and mergers over the years, which explains why these 8 units are so different. Each one comes with its own history and its own approach to quality. And that's where Ajay Sinha comes in, the chief corporate quality manager. He's the one trying to create a unified brand image, for this rather diverse group.
Oh, I bet that's a challenge, especially when you consider the sheer range of products. I mean, they've got motors, transformers, ceiling fans, circuit boards. It's not like they're just making, the same widget over and over.
Yeah, exactly. And then you add in this whole other layer of complexity, the rise and fall of system certification in India. Back in the 90s, the 2000s, globalization was booming. Indian companies were scrambling to keep up. They wanted to meet those international standards.
Ah, yes, the ISO 9001 craze.
Right.
Everyone wanted that little badge of honor.
Exactly. Certification was the golden ticket. At least that's how it seemed. Customers demanded it. The government was giving out subsidies. It fueled this huge boom in the certification industry. But whether it actually led to better quality, well, that's another question.
So what happened? What changed?
The market shifted. It went from a seller's market to a buyer's market. And suddenly, the value of certification, it started to go down. Audit quality dropped. Companies started taking shortcuts. And people began to question, is all this paperwork really making a difference?
And this is where Ajay Sinha's story gets really interesting. His whole career, it's intertwined with this trend, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He started as a surveyor, worked his way up to auditor. He saw firsthand how disillusioned people were getting, with the certification industry. He saw how a well-intentioned system could go off track, how market forces and just, human nature could really distort things.
Wow. Talk about a front row seat to the evolution of quality. And now he's at BEL, dealing with the same complexities but on a larger scale. It's almost like he's been preparing for this his whole career.
He does have a unique perspective, that's for sure. He's seen both the good and the bad.
Okay, enough backstory for now. I'm itching to get into the specifics. Let's start with Andheri West, the motor unit, and Navi Mumbai, where they make transformers. What stood out to you about these two?
They're a study in contrasts, especially in a cost-sensitive market like India and Dairy West with its old equipment. It's like a time capsule.
I love that part. They were so proud of their old machines, claiming they still produced good quality motors. But their approach to warranty costs, 1%, and they were like, good enough.
It's an interesting kind of pragmatism. They're all about efficiency, keeping those costs low, which is crucial, of course. But their indifference to warranty costs, it does make you wonder, is that sustainable in the long run?
Yeah, it makes you think. Is good enough a strategy? Or is it just complacency? Especially when you compare it to Navi Mumbai, where they seem to be in total denial about their quality problems.
Right. On the surface, Navi Mumbai seems confident. They boast about zero rejection of their transformers. But when you dig a little deeper, a different picture emerges. Customer complaints are brushed aside. They call them customer service calls. And then there's this reliance on substandard suppliers.
Oh yeah, that sister concern.
Yeah.
Supplying those faulty transformer cores. That whole thing raises some serious questions about accountability and whether they're really committed to quality.
It seems like everyone's pointing fingers. Nobody wants to take responsibility.
Exactly. And Ajay even suggests implementing total quality management. Could that be the answer? Or is it too little, too late?
TQM could be a good fit, but it requires a real cultural shift. Are they willing to make that change? That's the question.
It's a big question. And speaking of cultural change, it's time to move on to our next pair of units. Batty, making ceiling fans, and the Aurangabad unit, a joint venture producing micromotors. Now, those are two very different stories. One seems trapped in this race to the bottom, while the other is all about cutting-edge tech. We'll unpack all that in part 2 of our deep dive. We're back and ready to explore 2 more units. These ones really show how companies are trying to deal with how quality is changing in the world. So we've got Batty, they're making ceiling fans. They seem to be caught in this race to the bottom. And then we have Aurangabad, totally different story. They're all about high-tech, controlled, advanced, the whole package.
Are they comparing apples and oranges?
Or maybe a horse-drawn carriage to a Tesla.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But let's start with Batty. Mr. Joglekar, he gave us a pretty bleak picture, an industry that's struggling to keep up. What did you make of his perspective?
He's seen a lot of changes. He talked about how cheap Chinese imports, they've really forced Indian companies to change. To compromise, maybe?
Yeah, he said a lot of them are just slapping their labels on imported stuff, caught in this use and throw mentality.
He doesn't see that as good for anyone.
No, not for the customers. And not for the industry either. It was really interesting to hear about all their relocations. First Andheri, then Silvassa, now Batty. Always chasing lower costs.
It makes you wonder what gets lost along the way.
Right, like their infrastructure is so minimal. And they rely so much on their suppliers. Quality control must be a real nightmare.
He even questioned what customer satisfaction means now.
Yeah, his line about as long as the fan spins. That was a bit cynical on the surface.
But I think there's a deeper point there.
Oh, absolutely. He's frustrated.
It's like just meeting the basic requirements. That's not enough anymore.
No, it's not about ticking boxes.
It's about going above and beyond.
Exactly. Which brings us to Aurangabad. Quality is everywhere you look there. But even with all their fancy tech and systems, they're still struggling to hit that 50 parts per million target, the one set by their German parent company.
It shows the cultural clash.
Right.
This meticulous long-term approach.
It's a stark contrast to what we saw in Batty.
Where it's all about speed and cost pressures.
I love that part where Ajay questions their 10-year timeline. It's like 2 different worlds colliding.
It makes you wonder if they can find a middle ground.
Can they blend that German quality with the realities of Indian manufacturing?
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
So we've got the high-tech Germans, but remember that sister concern, the one supplying those faulty transformer cores. Well, get ready for a wild ride, because now we're heading to Khopoli, the home of the stampings unit. And this is where things get a little shady.
Khopoli is a prime example of how certification doesn't always mean quality.
It's like quality theater.
Exactly.
They're more focused on looking good for the auditors
than actually building a good system.
It's kind of disheartening to see, honestly.
Yeah.
The infrastructure is crumbling. They don't even have dedicated quality staff.
And they're relying on a consultant to
basically fake it.
To fake compliance, yeah.
It's like they're just checking boxes.
Not really embracing the whole idea of quality.
And that could have real consequences.
Yeah, like those faulty cores, they can mess up the whole supply chain.
Cause problems for other units.
And ultimately, damage the brand.
It's a classic case of the weakest link. Okay, let's move on to a unit that seems to be somewhere in between, the Vadodara unit. They make food processors. They've had some wins, but also some big challenges.
It's a real mixed bag.
Mr. Patel, the unit head, he's quite a character.
Yeah, a real entrepreneur.
He built the Bhaskar brand from scratch.
Navigated partnerships, mergers, the whole thing.
And he learned some tough lessons early on.
Yeah.
About the importance of quality. It clearly had a big impact on him.
It shaped his whole approach to management.
I was really interested in his philosophy on training. Every employee spending half an hour each month learning something new.
It doesn't even have to be about quality.
Right. It's about fostering that culture of improvement.
That continuous learning mindset.
But when you look at their actual performance, it's inconsistent.
The motors, they're doing great.
Almost perfect.
But the plastic molding and final assembly?
They're lagging behind. It almost seems like their quality depends on Mr. Patel's attention.
When he focuses on something,
they made progress.
Like with the motors.
They got rid of end-of-line testing, achieved super low defect rates.
But when his attention shifts,
the other departments struggle. It shows you the limitations of relying on one person.
You need to build a system.
A system that empowers everyone.
Not just depend on one person to drive everything.
And then there's that thing about how they measure rework.
Tracking incidents instead of the number of pieces repaired.
It makes you wonder if they're really capturing the full picture.
Are they underestimating the cost of rework?
Maybe even masking the true extent of their quality issues.
It's a good reminder that data can be misleading.
You need to look beyond the numbers.
Understand the context.
All right, for our last stop, let's travel all the way to Guwahati, the Instrument Transformers unit. This one is doing some truly amazing things.
It's a complete contrast to some of the other units.
Like a quality oasis.
A totally different world.
From the moment Ajay arrives, he's surrounded by this culture of quality.
It's not just talk, it's in everything they do.
They even have a quality anthem.
They're serious about it.
And their journey to near zero defects is incredible. They started at 16,000 parts per million back in 2002.
And now they're down to 67.
That's amazing. How did they do it?
Several factors, I think. They fully embraced those Japanese quality principles.
They have active employee involvement.
Quality circles.
They're constantly striving for improvement.
It's a holistic approach.
It really is.
Yep.
And it's clearly paying off. But all that comes at a cost, right?
Mr. Duss, the unit head, he admits
That's an investment.
But he argues the benefits outweigh the costs.
Increased productivity, fewer defects, happier customers.
It's a long-term strategy.
He also had that interesting point about,
The economics of quality.
at some point, chasing ever lower defect rates. It can actually backfire.
It's about finding that balance.
Between perfection and practicality.
Exactly.
Guwahati is a great example. A small unit, far from headquarters, leading the way on quality.
Right.
But can they replicate that success in other units?
Can Ajay Sinha bottle that magic?
That's the big question. He's seen it all now. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now he has to figure out how to move forward.
What's the best path for BLL as a whole?
Big decisions to make.
Should he standardize everything?
Or let each unit do its own thing.
And how do you even measure success in this situation?
What does quality even mean for BEL? We'll tackle those questions in part 3 of our deep dive. We've been through a lot. 8 units, each with its own quality story. From Andheri West with those old machines, high-tech Aurangabad, and of course Guwahati, that quality oasis. But now the question is, what does it all mean for Ajay Sinha? What's the future of quality at BEL?
It's amazing to see how BEL reflects the whole history of quality management. You know, we saw those old school inspected out methods, the rise and fall of certification.
Like a quality time capsule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you've got Six Sigma and that incredible commitment to continuous improvement in Guwahati.
It's like we've seen it all. And it brings up a key question. Standardization versus customization. Should Ajay push for one system across the board? Or let each unit do its own thing?
It's a tough one. He needs to unify their approach to quality.
But still respect those differences.
Right. And he needs to tie it all back to BEL's overall strategy. Quality has to support their business goals.
So if you were in Ajay's shoes, what would you recommend?
I think a balanced approach is key, a framework that provides some standardization.
But also some flexibility.
Exactly.
Because a one-size-fits-all solution, it probably wouldn't work here.
No, not with this much diversity.
So a shared vision, but different paths to get there.
Give them the tools and the guidance, but empower them to find their own solutions.
It's like giving them the sheet music, but letting them interpret the melody.
I like that. And create a space for them to share, you know, a forum for quality managers.
To swap ideas, best practices.
Learn from each other's mistakes.
Build that culture of continuous learning.
And use data to track their progress.
So it's not just about better products. It's about better systems.
And a better culture.
But how do you measure success with something this complex?
Yeah, defect rates alone, they don't tell the whole story.
So what else should we be looking at?
What about employee satisfaction? Are they engaged? Do they take pride in their work?
And what about customer loyalty? Are they coming back for more?
Are they recommending BEL products?
Are they willing to pay a premium for quality?
That's a good sign.
It's about going beyond good enough. It's about striving for excellence.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it's about the impact BEL has on the world.
Are they making a difference?
Are they solving problems, improving lives?
That's the real measure of success.
That's a powerful thought. So for our listeners, what should they take away from all this?
I'd say think about your own definition of quality.
What are your standards?
And how can you achieve those standards in your own life?
Because quality is not a destination. It's a journey.
A journey of learning, improvement, and making an impact.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Bukhari Electricals. We've seen so many different approaches to quality, each with its own lessons to offer. I hope you've enjoyed the journey and that it's given you some food for thought. Until next time, keep diving deep.